Welcome to Watercolor and Wonder. And Wanderers, I've got something today that if you have painted with watercolor for any length of time, you have already wondered this. How do I get the paint to not be streaky and splotchy when I'm trying to just make a smooth background, or what we call a wash? And I'm going to show you how to do that today. The answer is pretty surprising in that the key is to use our paintbrush as little as possible, which seems strange since we are painting, but I'll show you what I mean in the demonstration to follow. At the end of today's video, I'm also going to show you a really fun exercise to practice this new skill, and it results in just a cool design that's not tedious to do when you're learning something like just doing repetitive things over and over. It looks really interesting and it's fun, so I'll show you that at the end. The supplies that you're going to need are all linked in the show description, so you can click there if you don't have these already. We're going to need some watercolor paper. I like the Canson brand for this. It's very accessible at a great price point and works really well for what we're doing. You're going to need a paintbrush. Now, if I'm doing detailed work, I love my water brushes, love them. But if I'm doing a wash, my round brushes are going to be much more effective. And to give you just an idea of the size, this is a size 6, this is a size 12. I'll be using at least the 12, and the more area you're trying to cover, the bigger the brush you'll want to use. So we're gonna start with some smaller sections, so I'm gonna use a 12 today to give you these are just round brushes. You'll also need some watercolor paint and a palette. The colors are gonna be up to you, pick whatever you'd like. You'll need at least 3 colors. So that is what we need to get started, and let's get right into the demonstration. Today I'm going to show you how to make 2 different kinds of washes, or just a smooth color without any splotches or streaks. I have cut a piece of paper in half and I have taped it down with just some painter's tape, but you can use if you have Scotch tape on hand or whatever tape you have available. And the reason I've done this is that we need gravity to help us, and the way we do that, I've taped it to the board, and I'm going to use a slight incline. And I'm just going to put my tape roll underneath there to help me get that. And here's how we're going to begin. You get to, let's just pick one color for this. First, we're just going to do a solid color, top to bottom, no streaks. I'm going to pick a nice green and start mixing that up on my palette. And the way I'm doing that is I'm just taking my brush and I'm scraping the edge so I can leave as much paint here and don't transfer it to my water, because I don't want to paint from my water, I want to paint from my palette. So we're trying to get all the paint to stay right here. Before we begin, just like normal, a good practice, mix up as much of the paints that you think you'll need before you start painting, because the watercolor will start drying once you start. So you can see I'm getting a pretty good and saturated color. I don't want to be able to see through this paint. I want it to have enough paint in the water that I can't see through it, and that way I'm gonna have a nice intense color. If you want a pastel, you can always add more water and dilute it, but I want this to be a pretty intense green for what we're doing today. So I'm gonna put plenty of water and plenty of paint here to have a good size puddle before we begin. So you can see it's coming along there. So just take a moment, mix up any color you want for this. Okay. And then at the end of this, we will be showing the fun exercise. So to start with, I've got this brush and I have it what we call fully loaded. It's loaded with paint. It is just completely full. And I'm gonna go top to bottom. I'm gonna take this full brush of paint, and remember I told you the secret was to use our brush as little as possible, and this is what I mean. I'm gonna take my brush across here, across the top, and I'm going to barely touch the bristles. Like, your bristles should not bend at all when you're doing a wash. You're just using the tip, and here's why. So you can see I'm going across, and I've got all this paint, and the gravity is pulling it down, making what we call a bead of water or watercolor here. I'm just going to continue to take the tip of my brush, barely touching, and pull the bead down to the next row. I'm going to do that again and again. If you are painting along and you lose your bead, and that means you haven't gone back to get enough paint and it's gone, you just fill your brush up and you just gently tap it along the last row and it will create a new bead of water for you. So make sure you're going back to get that. By continually refilling your brush, you're going to make sure your color is consistent all the way down. And so we're just working our way. You can do this more quickly as you get more comfortable with it. But just take your time and make sure you don't lose the bead. If you do, get more paint and bring it and tap it back in like that. There we go. So we're just pulling it down, and it's key to keep doing that very gently. And you can see as I'm going behind, it's leaving this very nice, smooth green background. When we get to the end of this section, there's something very important you're going to need to do. So when we get down here to the bottom, we've pulled the bead. I'm just going to work a little faster. You take your time. Gentle all the way, no strokes, your brush doesn't bend. Okay, so now I'm getting down here close to the end. I've got to deal with this bead of water. If I leave it, as it dries, it will bleed back up and my consistent color will be gone. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna now make a thirsty brush. I do that by wiping all of the paint and water out of here. My brush is as dry as I got it there. And I'm gonna gently take it along the bottom, and it's going to drink up all that bead. I'm going to do that a couple times. Dry it out, go back, and just gently take a thirsty brush and let it pick that bead up for you like magic. If you had a lot, I might even hold it up like this if you want gravity to work a little faster for you, because it might take a couple of times for it to pull all the paint down. You just want to make sure there's not an excess amount left down here. You can see it's just like a vacuum cleaner along the bottom there. And then as we let that dry, it will dry completely smooth now. So that's how we create a solid wash without streaks or brush strokes. Pretty simple in theory, but it does take some practice to get the hang of. So give yourself some patience and grace as you're learning this new skill. It's one of the harder things to do with watercolor. All right, now we're gonna do, this was solid, now we're gonna do on this side what's called a gradient. So we're gonna start with a color darker at the top and move to lighter at the bottom. I'm gonna go ahead and mix up a second color for that, just because I like colors and might as well use another pretty one. So I'm gonna get a nice blue mixed up here. I'm gonna do the same thing as before. I don't need as much paint this time, and obviously I have plenty of green left over. Always better to have more than too little, because if I had run out of my green in the middle of this and tried to mix it up, two things are gonna happen. One, it's gonna start drying and I'm probably gonna get a hard edge somewhere in there. Two, I will probably not match the shade exactly in my rush to do it, and so I'm going to change the color lighter or darker, and again, it's not going to be smooth. So better to have too much available than too little and ruin your wash. Okay, me doing a couple of blues together here just for fun. You pick whatever color you like and we'll go from there. Okay, same thing on this. On a gradient wash, we load our brush up completely full of this beautiful paint that we can't see through. It should be opaque over here on our palette because we've got enough color in it to make it nice and intense. I'm going to go across, gently across the top. Again, gravity's going to help me out, and I'm going to do it might take a stroke or two across to get our bead forming, but there we go. Maybe you need to dot it in to get it. And so with this, it's going to be largely up to you on how you want this to fade out. If you want it to fade out sooner, you will just stop going back to your paint for your bead and start getting a little bit of water instead. I'm going to pull the color down a little bit more, maybe 1 or 2 times there. And then now, instead of going to paint, I'm going to get water to refill my bead. And what that's going to do is just going to slowly dilute the color. And we pull it down. If you want to do it even faster, make sure you keep your bead. Again, if you lose it, just grab some water and dot it along gently along the edge. You can see my tip is barely touching. And we still have a beautiful blue, but it is definitely getting lighter. If you want to speed that process up, if you want to transition faster, you can just wipe your brush out to get rid of any leftover blue paint. Ooh, and I even pulled a bit of green back. I wiped too hard. That's all right. We'll just go with it. We'll Bob Ross it and say it's a happy accident. Here we go. So we got plenty. I'm just gonna move quickly down. I've got plenty of bead now, so I'm not even gonna go back for water. I'm gonna pull it all the way to the end. And we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna create a thirsty brush again, so I'm gonna dry that out. I'm gonna go back. It's less critical on this one because it's already so light, but you don't wanna like wrinkle your paper, have extra water standing on your paper for no reason, and it can still affect the gradient by bleeding back up. So I'm just gonna pick that up. I'm gonna help gravity and pick my board up a little and let it drip down a little faster. But you can see now we've transitioned from a lovely blue, and it just lightened as we went. And so now we know how to create a solid wash and a graded wash. And the final thing we're going to do today to practice washes in an interesting and fun way will be to take the other half of our paper, which I happen to have right here, and you're going to need a ruler or any, straight edge. And we're just going to create random lines any which way on here to create these little segments. And then I'll show you what we're going to do with them. This is a wonderful way to just really get used to making those washes, getting really good at making them smooth, picking up your bead, carrying it down, but not in a tedious way. So I'm going to stop there. The more lines you make, the smaller your segments, so the smaller your washes will be. You'll need 3 colors, so I'm going to mix up a third color. I'm just going to add a nice deep blue here. And I am going to tape this down to a board so that I can help, so that gravity can help me, even though the sections are smaller. You don't have to, especially as you get used to this. And you have small sections to wash, you will need to tape and tilt less because you'll be able to move quickly enough and just pick it up with your brush gently. But for this first time, definitely tape it and use a board so you can tilt it. You'll have to tilt it different ways depending on which segment and which way you're going. So here we go. Hope you had a great time learning how to make a smooth wash, and that this practice really gives you the confidence to move forward in your painting. Thanks for joining. Subscribe and like if this was helpful to you, and I'll see you next time.